people, or they're hoping.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Unemployment. That is another sign of the weakness of the
We
economy
are
right now. The latest numbers show that
looking
unemployment
at
in Canada just over 7%, according to Statistics Canada.
the announcement
outlook, though, is even starker for
regarding
people under the age of
Canada's
25,
federal
with
budget.
unemployment rising, sitting at 14.7%. That's the highest rate it's been since 2010, except, of course, during the pandemic years. But it has been a struggle for a lot of young people, a lot of university students and others. Camilla Lemus is a second-year student at Carleton University, worried about the cost of living herself and her employment prospects, and she joins me here in Ottawa. Camilla, nice to see you.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Tell me what it's been like for you. You're in university, you're trying to save money, pay for things, and find work. What has that been like?
It's honestly been terrible. First year I was living on residence at Carleton. This year I entered the housing market and renting with my roommates. And it's been definitely an experience. This whole summer, I was trying to land a job in Ottawa, wasn't able towards
We're just a few minutes away, ladies and gentlemen, from the
after 3 months of looking
budget being
and that
released.
Job was 40 minutes away from my house. And as soon as I started school, it was so hard to manage school and work. But at the same time, I was dealing with having to pay $1,000 a month for rent, which is something that obviously, although I did foresee those costs last year when I was paying residents at Carleton, having that every month responsibility of paying $1,000 plus groceries, plus bills, plus all of these things was definitely hard. And having to manage school at the same time, it was way harder. It was either I worked and was able to hardly even afford to pay my rent and my groceries and all these responsibilities, or having to go to school and having to sacrifice, that academic performance and all of that. So now I'm taking.
So what are you doing? How are you making it work?
Well, right now I had to go down in my course load, which is obviously making me fall behind overall, but it's just impossible to be able to work and also do a 5-course load or full course load. So right now I'm doing a 3-course load and I'm still at my work, but it's what I'm making with my $17.50, $18 an hour. It's barely anything for the things that I have to
I'm
afford.
questioning whether I'm actually going live.
Bit on 07 and student help government or help from the government.
Now I see I'm going live on Instagram.
Yeah. Will you be looking at the budget to see if there's anything in there that would help you? I mean, what would help you at this stage?
Well, I know there's
welcome Herbert
they're focusing
Kober
on affordability and
housing,
Cookie, but at the same time
on Instagram.
I don't know if that's gonna tackle students specifically. You know what I mean?
How about Substack? Do I have to do something else?
Yeah, housing is a crisis that we are all facing.
I don't think so.
Canadians,
Substack usually works.
I was talking to my roommates.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're broadcasting live as the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, brings down his first federal budget.
We're having to afford $3,000.
That's going to be in about 5 minutes
every month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Camilla,
and we're broadcasting here at Policy Watch live
you need as you're trying to get through university
on YouTube,
thank you for telling us about
Substack,
it. We appreciate you sharing your
and
perspective,
Instagram.
And we'll see if there's something here that might help.
Definitely. Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks,
Thank you,
nice
Matt Moore,
for
confirming, because I never know. I never know
We are now about
if it's actually working.
from the finance
Unless
minister
somebody
entering
writes,
the House of Commons.
"Hey,
It's
Matt,
always
can you
on
let me
time.
know, can you
Certainly
hear
this
the
Prime Minister
audio
likes
okay
things to be on time
from
and
CBC?"
tabling the budget. Once that budget is tabled, that's when the CBC's David Cochrane,
that's
who's
always
been in that budget lockup through the day, will be able to come out and
nerve-wracking.
tell us what's in it. And
Just
what
because
will
I can hear
matter
it doesn't
to
necessarily mean you
Here's
can
the
hear
Prime
it.
Minister and
You know what I
others
mean?
making his way into the House of Commons. Is it? No, it's other MPs. Sorry. Other MPs making their way in and staff members as we get ready for
Very exciting
this
moment.
first budget by the Prime Minister, by Mark Carney, the first budget from his government, which we are expecting
Oh,
to
great.
be substantive.
Good to know,
both
Matt.
in terms of
Thank you.
spending and in terms
As
of
Matt
deficit.
said,
Rafi,
we
please
are
stand with me.
live.
Can
You
tell
are
they're
live.
joining me now.
And he
For a last
confirmed
thought before
that,
things
yes,
get underway. Rafi, I'm going to start with you. You were
the-
with the
you
Prime
can hear the
Minister
audio
in
on
Asia over
YouTube.
that 10-day trip. What's your
I'm
sense
actually
about how focused
broadcasting
they
this
were
live
and
on
are
two
on this
YouTube
document
channels.
to sort of
So
set the
my
trajectory of the
main
government going
Green
forward,
Neighbor
if they survive,
channel,
of course.
which is
If
an
they
environmental
survive,
channel,
very focused. I mean, both
and
publicly
my
in the
Policy
remarks we were
Watch.
getting from Prime Minister
Green
Mark
Neighbor
Carney and
Policy
other
Watch.
ministers, and also
Right here,
privately, you
right-
could tell
right
behind
here.
the scenes
Green
those
Neighbor.
Prime Minister's office
Policy
staffers,
Watch.
they were bleary-eyed. I mean, we would see them at breakfast sometimes just hunched over their laptops.
Because
not really
this is
talking
related to both,
anybody. You
because
really had
there's
the
going to
sense
be
that they were working
environmental
on this thing up
spending,
to the last
probably,
minute.
we've
And,
already
you know,
heard
keep in mind how
about
this trip was
cuts
kind of
being made
overshadowed
to
by the halted trade
environmental
talks
spending.
with the U.S., right? I mean, Carney spoke to
But,
U.S. President
and of course,
Donald Trump.
Policy Watch,
At
because
one
this
point,
is
journalists
this
were
is as
asking
political
the Prime
as it can
Minister,
get.
well, what is your plan now? Because it looks like those halted trade talks are not restarting. And Carney would say, well, the plan is the budget, really kind of pointing people toward this document, toward today.
Here comes the Prime Minister now. If we can just pop that up while you're talking, Rafi.
Prime Minister's
Make his
coming
way
now.
Inside the House of Commons.
Of course.
I saw some of his staff members, so he will be shortly following, I'm sure. There he is, with François-Philippe Champagne. Maybe we'll just listen.
François-Philippe Champagne.
A budget for the country for the moment. This is generational. Couldn't be prouder of my finance.
We're ready. We're ready.
Okay,
You
merci
know,
beaucoup.
an investment budget, des investissements générationnels. We'll meet the moment.
Okay, well, you can see there the theme of the budget, or the title of the budget. There always is one, Canada Fort, or Canada Strong, which isn't surprising. That's been much of the language from the Prime Minister and his government since being elected. Nisha, sorry to interrupt you, Rafi. I'm going to get Nisha in just before we get underway, because you've been talking to businesses, small business owners. I know one of the things that business wants to see here is some sense of stability and predictability. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, you know, small businesses I've been talking to, Rosemary, have been saying that they have less capacity to deal with these trade disruptions compared to bigger businesses. You know, they just don't have the runway to deal with these kinds of tariffs. And so they are looking for the federal government to take some of the pressure off. We know that the government has already announced a $1 billion relief fund to kind of help them strengthen their supply chains and find new export markets. The wish list does go on, though. They're looking for the return of those carbon tax rebates from 2024. That would be about $630 million. They're also looking for a lowering of the small business tax rate and a lot of other changes. But of course, Rosemary, we know that budgets are about priorities, and not everyone can have everything.
Nisha, maybe I'll just ask you one more question about Bay Street in terms of whether they are looking for something in specifically to try and, spur capital investment or try and get other countries and bigger companies from outside of this country to invest here.
Yeah, there could be some new tax measures. We know that Prime Minister Carney hinted last month that there would be some kind of review to make investing in Canada more attractive. We know that even before the trade dispute started, that Canada was suffering from a really serious productivity crisis, and they are looking for this Prime Minister to make it attractive to invest in Canada, to attract capital to this country, especially because we're competing with the U.S., which is also very competitive. Business on Bay Street and across the country really looking for some kind of certainty. This Prime Minister, I think they are optimistic that they will get some support here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out this is an issue that
hiking of the capital gains
that I
inclusion rate.
speak
The business
often
community
about.
was really
Investment in
uproar
Canada
about
is
that
great
last year,
as
saying
long
that
as
it
that
would deter
investment is
investment
coming
in
from
Canada.
Canadians.
I think that they're not going to see that kind of negative.
If that investment is
surprise
coming
this
from the States
Nisha Patel, thank
and
you
China
for
and
giving us
so
that
on and so
perspective.
forth,
Rafi, I'm going to come back to you and
then
just
you're
ask you
essentially
a last question as
selling
we wait
ownership
Finance Minister
in
Wise inside the House
your
of Commons, David Cochran here sitting next to you.
manufacturing
We'll bring him in
sector.
a moment, even though he can't tell us
You're
everything
essentially
until,
selling your
Francois
country.
Philippe Champagne starts
So,
speaking. But there's
I'm
been posturing,
very
the
sensitive
politics are
about that.
still
I don't
down.
like
It does sound like
encouraging
everyone wants to
foreign
take the lead of
investment, to
things
tell you
and see where
the
things
truth.
go.
That sounds terrible and so on.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we're
um,
getting the same kind of
at the
thing
end of the
from
day,
the opposition parties.
you'd
The
rather
Conservatives saying, you
own
know, they wanted that
than
deficit
be
kept to
owned.
42 billion. It doesn't
So
feel like
we're gonna
going
we're
that
gonna be
way.
watching out for
Also
that
bringing up
as they
the
bring down this
existence
budget.
still of the industrial carbon tax, which they oppose. And now, of course, we've got, as you were alluding to earlier, one Conservative MP, Chris d'Entremont, saying he's considering crossing the floor, according to Politicos. We haven't confirmed this, but it'll take a few days to review the budget. And incidentally, there won't be a debate in the House of Commons for another few days, right? Because the House doesn't sit next week.
Yeah.
So will he have made up his mind on whether he'll cross the floor by mid-November, which is when we would expect the budget vote? That's something to watch for. And then you've got the Bloc Québécois and the NDP kind of on the opposite side of the political spectrum, asking for government spending. In the Bloc's case, on senior top-ups. In the NDP's case, worried about these cuts that the government has been telegraphing. And so the question is, you know, will they sort of lean toward voting for the budget or opposing it on principle, or maybe abstaining? That's what the NDP said they could do too.
I'm not sure you can consider voting for the government's budget and stay in Conservative caucus, but we'll see how that unfolds for Chris d'Entremont. Rafi Boudjikanian, thank you so much. Appreciate that. You're seeing now inside the House of Commons, Francois Philippe Champagne about to table Budget 2025. Remember, we haven't seen a budget in an awfully long time. So this will also give us a good sense of the country's finances.
Probably too long.
As soon as this starts happening, David Cochran, who's sitting here beside me, will take us through what's in it.
Standing Order 83-1, I would like to table in both official languages the budget documents for 2025, including the notice of Ways and Means motion. The details of the measures are contained in these documents. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I am requesting that an order of the day be designated for consideration of these motion, Mr. Speaker.
Hey there, Mr. Stevens. I see that you've joined on Instagram. Welcome. Oh, what happened to the sound? Oh, was that me?
Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I am requesting that an order of the day be designated for consideration of these motion, Mr. Speaker.
Hey there, Mr. Stevens. I see that you've joined on Instagram. Welcome. What happened to the sound?
Okay, the finance minister is on his feet, and he's going to take us through his speech, which we will dip
Mute that.
into.
I don't know. I hope.
But first,
let me
let's
know,
bring in David
ladies and
Cochran,
gentlemen,
the
on
host of Power and
Instagram,
Politics, who has
if you
been
can
in
hear
the
this.
budget lockup, and will
Like
take
if
us
you can
through
hear
the
me
highlights.
over the
Here
mic
it is. It's
and
called Canada Strong, Budget 2025. You can see all the tabs that made. There's a lot
Francois
in this,
Philippe
Rosie,
Champagne right now.
including a big jump
Let
in
me
the
know.
deficit. Let's
Send me
start
a
by
little
walking
message.
through the numbers. The big number is the deficit this year. It is $78.3 billion. Now, that's not the $100 billion some people projected, but that's a heck of a lot higher than people are used to seeing in a non-COVID year, and it stays at an elevated rate in all the years after this, going out until 2030. You can see the $78.3 billion this year. It's going to be $65.4 billion next year, $63.5 billion the year after that. Just shy of $58 billion and just shy of $57 billion by 2029, 2030. Broadly, Rosie, this year and the next couple of years, the deficit is twice as high as we would have seen in the fall economic statement that Chrystia Freeland tabled in December, and growth is half of what was projected just 9-10 months ago. Now, you're at that deficit despite there being some significant cuts and downsizing in the size of the public service. There is going to be a net overall reduction in the size of the public service of nearly 10%. In this year alone, you're looking at 16,000 full-time equivalent jobs being eliminated, and that will go to about just shy of 40,000 jobs being eliminated by 2028, 2029. In effect, what's happening is the civil service is being right-sized, to use the government's phrase, from its high of 368,000 people in 2023-24 to about 330,000 in 2028, 2029. That's the spend less so you can invest more. And on that, there is a series of investments in capital in particular. $115 billion towards infrastructure, $110 billion in productivity and competitiveness. That includes some tax incentives to get people to invest in equipment and in buildings. $30 billion in defense, just in capital in defense, Rosemary. There's a total of about $80 to $90 billion in defense over the next 5 years, a historic level of spending there, and $25 billion in home building. This is mostly the Canada Homes announcement that was made a few weeks back. To give you a sense of what is shifting here, program expenses normally grown by 8% a year. It's now grown by less than 1% a year.
Okay.
And this budget is shifting to capital. They're also going to try to bring down the population of the country by reducing the immigration targets. Permanent residents down from 395,000 to 380,000. But look at temporary residents. This is students. This is temporary foreign workers. A massive reduction
Cut in half,
from
yeah.
673,000 down to 385,000. And one last thing to highlight, Rosie, and we can go through any of these measures as you so choose, and this is the climate competitiveness strategy. The emissions cap, it's on the books to be scrapped. It's essentially, there's a couple of conditions that need to be met. They need to finalize the methane emissions reductions. They need to deal with the industrial price becoming the core of the plan, an agreement on a beefed up and strengthened industrial carbon price that then becomes the engine that drives down emissions as you move towards that 2050 net zero target. But some investments in carbon capture, some agreements on methane targets, and a move to an industrial price away from a regulatory system, you're going to see the emissions cap, which the oil and gas sector, the premiers of Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Saskatchewan have vigorously complained about over the years, that is going to go if everybody agrees to other methods that allows them to hit their climate targets of having net zero economy by the mid part of this century. So a 10% reduction in the civil service over the next number of years, billions of spending in capital and tax incentives, Rosie. The government says this will unlock about $1 trillion in capital investment. This is what they say is the generational transformation of this budget. We'll see.
Yeah.
Like I say, that investment
major projects agenda.
primarily should come
Okay,
from
we are going to dip
Canada.
back into the finance minister in a moment.
If it
as we
doesn't,
start speaking
then we're
English again,
trading
but
short-term
let's
gain
just
for
go
long-term
through-
pain.
I did want to just highlight this. I'm just catching up with where
Yeah,
you've been all
I hear
day,
you.
but there are social programs that the Prime Minister had promised would not be touched, and indeed there are many things being protected. The Canada Child Benefit, the school food program, the disability benefit, old age security program, not surprisingly, $10 a day childcare being
Yeah.
protected, workers benefit, the Canadian Dental Care Plan also being protected. So some of those programs that were signature programs of the Trudeau government stick around.
But
I've
what's
never,
interesting is the shift in budgeting approach that's outlined here.
Never
is
had the
going to make it
opportunity
very
to enjoy
difficult to
$10 a day
expand
childcare.
social
Let me know
programs
if
that
you have
require
in the
federal government
comments.
to pay or the federal government to cost share, because they've adopted two new fiscal anchors in this budget. One is a declining deficit to GDP ratio over time. Not
Thank you,
debt
Mr.
to GDP
Stevens,
ratio, Rosie,
for
as we're used to
confirming.
budgets, deficit to GDP ratio, but
Get the
also
audio.
that the operating
The audio is working.
side of the government ledger, direct program expenses, salaries, that is budgeted within 3 years. They'll keep spending and borrowing for capital investment, things that spur economic growth, but not for program expenses and salaries, which changes the whole thought process of the finance department and the cabinet. And that when you make a cabinet proposal to go in the budget now, it has to have a capital component and an economic spin-off component, unlocking private
Otherwise,
sector
it doesn't
investment. Programs are going to be difficult to do without also cutting something else to pay for something new.
So they project that they're going to save $60 billion over 5 years by reviewing what is in departments. Is
So
that
this is essentially the job issue. You got to go to
Yeah.
page, I believe, 212 of the budget for those following along at home. You're looking at essentially, they've been doing this workforce renewal and what they call the CER process, which is the cost efficiency review. And that was defined essentially 15% in every department that could either be eliminated or reprofiled or moved to another department. And it's not going to be a straight across the board 15% everywhere. Some departments are going to get hit harder than others in these changes. But what's interesting, Rosie, is that with the workforce reduction, they say they can do a lot of it. The 16,000 full-time equivalents in this year, decline of about 40,000 between 2028 and 2029. There's going to be an early retirement incentive for people, 50 and up in different groups. It's too complicated and long to get into here, but essentially you'd be able to go take your pension early without penalty if you qualify and hit these targets. So this is a way they're looking at reducing the size of the civil service without direct layoffs.
Okay, let's thank you so much for that, David. We'll take a minute and listen to a little bit to the Minister of Finance and come back.
Investments needed for Canada's future. We chose a different path, Mr. Speaker, a path that believes in Canada, a path that invests in our country's future, a path that reinforces Canadian values, a path that makes us less resilient on our trading partner, a path that allows us to be master in
I think
our
he meant
own house,
less
Mr.
dependent.
Speaker. We chose Canada.
And that's tricky business. That's the nuts and bolts of this. That's what I'm really interested in learning about.
And I hope every member of this House will choose Canada as well, Mr. Speaker. I hope they will all choose Canada. Parce que nous voulons tous et
Of course,
toutes
everybody's
être
going to
maîtres
choose
chez
Canada.
nous d'abord,
But what does that mean?
Parce que
Masters of
nous
our own
croyons
home,
tous et
Mr.
toutes dans
Speaker.
le Canada, Monsieur
We
le
all
Président.
believe in Canada, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, when our steel, aluminum, forestry, auto, and agriculture industries were hit by U.S. tariff and trade disruptions, we did not stand by and wait for the storm to pass. We stepped in with the most comprehensive set of trade resilience measures in Canadian history because this is who we are as Canadians, Mr. Speaker. This is who we are. When times get tough, we stand together because we are Canadian. The government launched
I would agree.
The government launched the Strategic Response Fund that my colleagues have been leading, allocating $5 billion to help sectors impacted by tariffs to adapt, to diversify, and to grow. Businesses can use the fund to invest in the design of new products, retool plans to boost productivity, or offset the cost of accessing new markets. Because we want our industry to succeed. We want them to be able to make this pivot, Mr. Speaker. Because we believe in our workers, we believe in our industry, we believe in our future, we believe in Canada.
I mean, of course. Nobody's going to say they don't believe in Canada. Let's get to the nuts and bolts.
We also introduced a $1 billion liquidity relief package to help small and medium-sized businesses because these businesses help our great country
Okay, that is a
grow.
little bit of the
And
finance minister delivering his speech to explain Budget 2025, which includes, yes, billions of dollars in spending, but also an attempt to rein in government spending by cutting 16,000 jobs in the public service this fiscal year. That's 4.5% of the workforce as of March 2025, and going up to a decline of about 40,000. 10%, I guess, from the peak at 2023-24. I'm going to bring in Sharon D'Souza. She's the national president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Nice to see you. Thank you for making the time. I know you're just sort of getting caught up here, and I'll bring David in because he's actually been reading it more than I have.
Oh, hey, Sweet Pea.
You were expecting cuts. Were you expecting
Welcome.
numbers this
Welcome.
big, 16,000
Didn't notice you there for a
full-time
while.
positions?
Well, we were expecting
How are
cuts,
things
and
going?
Without a doubt, when the minister made the announcement that they're looking to go back to pre-pandemic numbers, when we looked at the juxtaposition, we're talking about 70,000 jobs. So we had an idea that there would be a cut.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that these cuts are drastic. I believe that there should have been more work done and consultation done before such an announcement is made.
It does sound as though there will be, according to David, an attempt to push people towards retirement, attrition. Packages, I guess, will be offered to people without penalty. Does that soften the blow in any way?
Not at all, because who can retire in this economy? Let's be really honest. People are having a difficult time making ends meet. And in some cases, especially smaller communities, these federal public sector jobs are what keeps this economy going.
David, any questions for Sharon?
Yeah, I mean, there's a line here
So I got
the
this
budget
new
that says this is a transformational time
video
for
card.
public service to revisit how we work, how we can improve services to Canadians, and how we
And
can
it cuts
build
out
for
my
the future.
my
A
camera
leaner public
every,
service
I don't know,
is a more
half an hour or
empowered
something.
and
I
productive
have to just go
public service.
turn my camera on and
The
off.
net size of the workforce by the end of this process,
Bit of a
according to the
drag.
government,
I
by
have to figure that out.
2028, 2029, will be about 330,000 employees. So a reduction of about 40,000 from peak. You mentioned a 70,000 number. This is 40, so it's not quite all the way. It's a little over half.
Well, there's a problem with just that number because we did our own polling. And what our polling has shown that the majority of the Canadians that we polled said, you know, that they would rather see this government focus on making their lives more affordable. And they're concerned about cuts to public services because 64% of them believe that they're already strained.
Right, but the public service did get large, particularly during the pandemic, and the government's point is this is bringing it back to a size that is more manageable, given that taxpayers are paying for the public service.
Yeah,
Without a doubt, but what they want is services right now when they are in a time of need. They truly believe that the services will be impacted by these cuts. And I have to say, I agree with them.
I'd love to hear
And
more detail.
My only
The
concern
services.
is
What
we
are
have
they?
a lot of challenges
The
coming our way.
services?
And when we're talking about
You're talking about when you
transformation
go to
and
get a
this
driver's
innovation
license
that they
or
want Canada to be in, it's great, but
long
it's federal
waits
public
at
sector workers
the
who
emergency
actually do that
room
work.
in a hospital?
And so when we're talking about
I'd like to hear
streamlining, we're
more
talking about
specifics on that.
infrastructure, we're talking about transformative public services, this is great. But every department and agency actually connects with each other. And so right now, with the blanketed announcements, there needs to be more work done because when you cut one arm, guess what? It doesn't mean that work automatically transfers to another
One more
area.
thought from David.
No, you know, but in talking to officials inside the budget briefing, the lockup as we call it, that they held for journalists today, there was a concession that there's been a problem with execution on a lot of the infrastructure programs and other things that they wanted to do, that the public service, as large as it got, wasn't delivering on the execution of some of these programs. And I guess their view is that a leaner, more focused, with a fewer number of priorities could be more efficient. I mean, what's your rebuttal to that? Because I'm sure you're not going to agree.
Well, what I think is, I've been here before. I've been here under Harper. I've seen the public service be cut and chopped and dismantled. I've seen what happens when it doesn't work, and I've seen them staff up. And right now, just last year, I can say in 2024, 10,000 jobs have been cut. And guess what? We are not making our call center I guess you can say the phone calls aren't being answered because there's not enough people. And there's an impact on that. And they're hiring up again. And there's also mandatory overtime that's happening. So for me, when we're looking at a public service, you need to have the right people in the positions, but you need the bodies there. And these cuts, to me, could be seen as performative. Because if the services aren't being delivered and you don't have the bodies there.
You know what I always think about
Sharon, just
when
as
I
the
hear
National
this
President of the Public
issue
Service Alliance,
is,
I'm sure we'll speak again. Thank you for your initial.
could you
thoughts on this.
deliver
Thank you.
the same or a similar
Okay, wanna
degree
bring
of
back,
service
David,
with
just to
less
go over
money?
Some of the points there that you flew through the
And for
first
those
time.
who
Let's
work
go back to some of
in
the
industry or
spending,
government, you
measures
probably
in
see
terms of
a
how
number
the
of
government
roles
plans
around
to
you where you're
attract
thinking,
capital investment,
do you
and
really
where do
need,
think that's
do you
going to
really
come from?
need
Yeah, so there's
whatever,
couple of
a
things here, Rosie. There's
full-fledged
about $280
MBA
billion
to
in
be
capital
answering the
investments that they
phones
outlined.
here?
There's some of this is
Could
carryover of
could somebody
measures
be
like
doing this for
accelerated
minimum wage, or
write-off
could
of
this be an
equipment purchases,
opportunity for
computer
students
upgrades, that Chrystia Freeland had
working
in her
their way
fall
through
economic statement of December
college or
16,
university?
2024, which got overshadowed by something else she
Yes,
wrote
it did.
that day, being her
The
resignation letter.
problem with when they
But
just
there is some
talk
expansion
in
on
general
that,
terms
and
like this,
on
is
the tax
it's
side.
hard to relate
Peter Armstrong
exactly
will be here
to
get really deep into this later. But
you know
they
what,
are giving it
how we
immediate
could address
expensing for
this issue
manufacturing
of
and
providing
processing
government
buildings.
service in
So
general,
essentially, if you're
government
getting into the
service,
critical minerals game, if you're getting
for
into
fewer
the
dollars.
extraction game, and you need to build a building for processing, or if you need to retool, say, a car operation into a different type of operation, there's a tax incentive there that in a lot of cases will reduce the effective net tax on some of these things down to zero. There's also an accelerated capital cost allowance for low carbon liquefied natural gas facilities, which is interesting. In the first tranche of the major projects, that is a key part of this whole economic plan for Mark Carney. There was some natural gas components to this. They're now having a lucrative tax incentive here for for low carbon natural gas. And the lower your emissions, the higher the credit you get. And it's not based on a benchmark. It's based on how my LNG plant competes with your LNG plant
You could-
for lower emissions, and you qualify then for the
You could
incentive.
have a channel
It's a key thing,
dedicated
and
just
Peter
to
will explain
liquefied
this a little
natural
bit more,
gas,
but on the
ladies and
manufacturing
gentlemen.
and processing side, this
Tricky
ability to write
business.
off the
It's
buildings
the
you need to
leaks
build
that
for
are
business expansion and write off the
a
equipment
major
that you
part
need
of the
inside
problem
of
with
it
that.
right away. It has the effect of lowering what's called the meter, the marginal effective tax rate, for manufacturing and processing to 0.4%. It's 12% in the United States. This is a competitive advantage they're hoping to get for the hard-hit manufacturing sector, where we've lost 30,000 jobs as a country, as an incentive to keep operations in Canada and maybe expand in some of the
Interesting.
Canadian-only opportunities.
Okay, let's dip back in, if we can, to the House of Commons, where the finance minister is delivering his speech on budget 2025, and we'll come back and speak more with David.
And I know, although the Conservative are silent in their heart, they support that, Mr. Speaker, because I know that they will take the break week to go around and tell their constituent how great we're going to see this country and all the investment we're going to see. And I know in their heart I can see them.
Canada is one of the best places in the world to invest, and we are going to make it even better. This fiscal strength allows us to make historic investments, not only today, but also for future generations.
To Canadians who feel the strain of these times, our message is clear. We will not back down. We will be there for you now and for as long as it takes. We will do what Canadians do best in times of need. We look after one another. We help each other. That's the Canadian way. That's our way, Mr. Speaker. Pour relever ce grand défi,
Meeting this great challenge, Mr. Speaker, requires both ambition and discipline.
nous devons être ambitieux dans
We
nos
need to be
investissements
ambitious in our investments
et rigoureux dans nos
and
dépenses.
rigorous in our spending.
Ce budget trace une
And that's why this budget charts
I
a
put
new
up that note
course
about Nova
for
Scotia
Canada's
MP
public
Chris
finances.
d'Entremont.
que les Canadiens et
Probably
Because
mispronouncing his
Canadians
name.
expect their government
He's the
to achieve
MP
results.
who's considering crossing
And
the
to get
floor
there,
and joining
we
the
must
Liberals.
spend
Okay,
less
we
on
are
our
going
wage.
to
I believe he's a
leave the
Conservative
finance minister as he continues his
member of
speech there
Parliament.
inside the House of Commons. The Green Party leader, Elizabeth May, has
So that
already
would
come
bring
out,
the
of
Liberals
the House to, of course, she
one
represents
precious
one
vote closer
one vote
to
would matter
passing
if you're
the budget.
seeking for just 3 votes to get this budget passed. But she has already declared where she stands on the budget. Take a listen.
Right now, would you vote no on the budget?
Absolutely. There's no way that we can, as Greens, vote yes on this budget. But I want to emphasize there are several days in which this budget can be negotiated and amended before it goes to a vote. And that's something that doesn't get discussed much. I am
It's a really good
surprised
point.
that Mr. Carney has not reached out, or that more of his ministers haven't reached out to say, what would it take to get Greens to vote for this budget? In the same way I hear from friends in the New Democratic Party, they haven't felt that there's been an effort to get us on side early on. So we are now in a position where I think every vote's going to matter, every vote's going to count.
Yep.
And I would invite the Prime Minister, and I've sent this message through the officials who were with us in the lockup, please let them know I'd like to talk, because there's some things that could be done that would make it possible for us to vote for this budget. Nous sommes dans un groupe
Okay,
avec
so
mon-
Elizabeth May, Green Party leader, of course, the only Green seat inside this iteration of the House of Commons, saying that as things stand now, she cannot support this budget, but says she's willing to
Why
talk, she's willing
wouldn't
to
Mark
negotiate
Carney
further.
be like
Let's just
sending
get back, David,
her,
through what is,
you
I wanna
know,
come to the infrastructure moment, but just in terms of
wine
what is
and
there for climate
chocolates
and what
and
would be, I
invitations
guess,
to come
the biggest
talk with
problem for Liz
him?
May would be probably ending the oil and gas
Golf,
emissions
pickleball,
cap.
hey tennis.
But
Hey,
to
let's
your point,
talk
they
about
are
this
moving
budget.
to strengthen the industrial carbon
I've-
pricing
I've-
system. So
I've never understood
I'm
that.
speculating as to what
In a
would
situation
separate
like
the
this,
votes,
where
but
you could end up
they're putting
facing
all
another
their
election,
eggs, if it were, into
take the
industrial
time
carbon
to
pricing
secure a
rather
few
than the
votes.
hard cap, which which had been causing problems for so many people.
So it's an if-then scenario.
Right.
If the country can agree on develop a post-2030 carbon pricing trajectory, we can get to a point where you don't need the emissions cap. And this is something even champions of emissions reductions have said to the government, not to do an emissions cap because you're bringing regulation into what they want as a pricing and market-driven solution. So essentially the plan is the government's going to sit down with the provincial and territorial governments and setting up a multi-decade industrial carbon price trajectory. Long-term certainty heading towards a net zero target by 2050. This is what all at the Conference of Partners, COP, they agreed to, is to get to a net zero economy by 2050.
But this only happens. They'll only get rid of the
Yeah,
cap
blah
if
blah
this
blah.
happens.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard right there.
They need to
Because
agree
at the
to
end
a
of the
stronger
day,
benchmark and
unless
backstop in that
unless you actually
I don't know,
reduce
Ontario falls below it, the government
like
moves
output
immediately,
of
puts it in and lets everybody know,
hydrocarbons,
we're coming in, we've all
you're
agreed to this, let's go.
it doesn't matter.
If
You
they
do
agree
a
to that,
cap, do a
they
price
agree
on
to,
carbon. It doesn't
movement
matter unless it
on
actually
methane
reduces
emissions,
output. It's not making a
movement
stitch
on
of
clean
difference.
electricity regulations,
So
because there's a series of
I
tax
always
credits
question
that were
this
announced in earlier budgets that are
this
now implemented in
nonsense
this one that will,
debating between
give you
these
tax
things.
write-offs for investing in
Maybe there's some
clean
of the
electricity sources,
nuance that
moving
I'm
away
I'm
from
not
fossil
appreciating.
fuels. So if you can do the methane, if
Let
you
me
do
know in
the
the comments.
electricity, if you can agree to an industrial carbon price on a long-term horizon to give certainty, then you can get to the oil and gas emissions cap. And it says effective carbon markets, enhance oil and gas methane regulations, and the deployment at scale of technologies such as carbon capture and storage will create the circumstances whereby the oil and gas emissions cap would no longer be required. So the Pathways
Hey,
Power
Patricia
Climate
Mark.
Project is a big
Welcome.
thing, and people like Daniel Smith
I
and
see you
Scott
just
Moe
joined
and
on
Tony Wakeham, the
Instagram.
new Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, the three main oil producing
Long time no
provinces,
see.
agreeing to an industrial carbon price with a 2050 horizon to get to net zero.
Send me a note.
That can
Let me
make
know how
oil
you're
and
doing.
gas emissions cap
Write a
go
little
away.
comment.
You'd still pay for your pollution in that sector, but you don't have to hit a certain emissions thing. And this goes back to what the Prime Minister's been saying. I'm interested in results, not necessarily specific policy instruments. And I think this has been part of the overtures to Daniel Smith in the private conversation.
You can get these mugs in the
So Liz May not
Green
not in
Neighbor
favor
merch
of
shop.
what she sees there when it comes to the environment, but
T-shirts
frankly,
too.
the government may not need the Green Party leader, and
Just
may
saying.
not want to negotiate on that strategy, given some of its other plans in terms of investment and indeed the things that it wants to put in place for infrastructure spending, which we will talk about with David in just a moment. But first, I want to bring in Sahir Khan of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, who is also inside the lockup, and he joins me now. Nice to see you.
Same here.
Give me your overall impression,
I like
Sahir
that.
Khan, of what you
Same
think
here.
of this budget. Is it indeed, as the government wants us to believe, a budget meant to invest and spur growth in this country?
This guy's a pro, I can tell.
Well, I'm not sure it's generational, but it really feels like a pivot. I think after a decade of social programs and wealth transfer, we see a government that's actually pivoted towards both defense and its NATO targets, but also with an industrial strategy to really start to counter the threat from our closest ally, which is weaponized trade, and embarked on very aggressive industrial policy.
Yeah,
So
for sure. We do
really
need to
see
do
that
that.
as a response and a focus on capital, which will have some long-term consequences for the way the federal government budgets and how it interacts with other orders of government.
What do you think is the move here that will attract all of this private investment that the government wants to see? I'm sure it's not just one thing, but the sense that you get from the budget in terms of how that will happen.
Yeah, I think that the idea here is that the federal government's looking to get leverage. I don't want to use the word catalyze. I think they use it 20 times in the budget, but they're looking to try to crowd in investment from the private sector, from other orders of government, and get leverage. And it's really the spark plug to try to see if we can hold on to our industrial sector and start to encourage Canadians to invest here, to have plants move to Canada and to have plants expand
See,
here. And
that's the
creating
key.
a favorable tax
The investment has to come from
provide targeted
Canadians.
subsidies and to provide some investment dollars that will hopefully attract others and make this kind of a target destination for capital.
What do you make of the size of the deficit? Certainly, it's not as high as $100 billion, which had been the fear, but it's not small potatoes either.
It's not, and at the IFSD, I think we had a range of about $75 to $90 billion, and they're kind of coming at the lower end of that range. I think we've kind of normalized larger deficits, and I'm not suggesting that's a good thing at all, But I can also tell you that any other G7 country would gladly trade places with Canada right now. I don't think this is going to move the needle on our credit rating with bond rating agencies. So I don't think we should look at it like it's a great number, but it's also a consequence of an anemic economy, a slow economy, the necessary responses. And if you're going to, it's going to create
that wasn't
a bit
me.
of a deficit.
That was them.
I think in the longer term, the federal government looks like they'll remain fiscally sustainable. But I also would suggest that there's not a lot of room left for large program spending, big transfer increases to the provinces. I think those days are over. And I think we've had, as David has said in the lockup, this is the third, Black Swan event. And so, the Treasury, the dry powder has kind of been spent. So this is going to have to work. And the hard work probably just begins now, which will be execution.
Yeah, the how, I agree, because that's that's the part that I'm never quite clear on how it's all going to happen. The spending review and the number of the amount of money they're hoping to save, $60 billion in savings over 5 years, largely coming from getting rid of public sector workers. Was that bigger than you thought? Do you think it's adequate? What did you make of that?
I think it was smaller than I thought. I suspect the government probably started with a deficit target in mind and kind of worked backwards and decided, what's the minimum number they have to take out of the public service payroll to make these numbers work. If we combine the natural attrition numbers with maybe some of the packages that get offered and some of the reductions they've already had, I don't think 40,000 is a really insurmountable number. And I think it probably can be done, as the minister says, with some compassion. I think it's the tip of the iceberg. I'm really hoping to see this government do reviews on an ongoing basis. But I also think that before Parliament has to approve the main estimates, the government's going to actually have to present a much more granular picture of how every department's going to achieve their target. As modest as they are, we didn't see that detail in the budget. It's really lacking. And I think it'll be very hard for the House of Commons to approve main estimates without knowing what service level impacts we could see in each department, how they're going to lay off people or make those adjustments, and what programs ultimately get affected by the cuts.
Let me end on this. If this is a document that is, you said it wasn't generational, but it's also supposed to be a budget to meet the moment, the hinge moment the Prime Minister says we're in, the crisis we are facing. Does it do that?
Yeah, I think within the resources that are available and the political constraints we have, it meets that hinge moment. But I just think that it's not like this is going to be a very quick response and a quick remedy. This is going to unfold over years and years. And the real test will be, can we maintain a budgetary discipline and a political discipline to make sure that we have an operating budget surplus and we're only borrowing for capital? I think it's a really good strategy for any government to employ. But it's another thing for governments to stick to that and maintain that discipline over years, because that's
what you'd expect from Mark Carney.
Going to do a pivot. I said it wasn't generational.
Understands economics.
It's definitely a pivot.
If it's a quick fix,
if they can stick to it,
then it's long-term pain.
Khan, thank you so much. Nice to see you.
Remember that. You don't want a quick fix.
Studies.
When it comes to the economy, no quick fixes. They'll just bite you in the rear down the road.
The leader of the Bloc Québécois has been speaking to give us a sense of where he stands with the budget so far, and then I'll come back to David and bring in Peter Armstrong. Let's listen in.
Bien le bonjour. Écoutez, le résumé est assez facile à faire. Le Bloc québécois a présenté des demandes qui ont été explicitement établies comme étant non négociables pour la suite des choses. Et elles ne se trouvent pas dans le budget de M. Champagne ou de M. Carney, qui venait probablement pour beaucoup le crayon. Il n'y a pas de fin de cet héritage de Justin Trudeau en ce qui a trait à la discrimination infligée aux aînés. Comprenons-nous bien, là. Les retraités de 65 à 75 ans vont continuer à recevoir un chèque de pension de sécurité de la vieillesse.
My French isn't that good, ladies and gentlemen. I think what he's saying is,
et dans toutes les associations, même ces gens-là
Art Lightstone of Green Neighbor is the best YouTuber. You really should subscribe to his.
Now, the government has a
$78 billion deficit, but it's not going to resolve this injustice. And basically, it's trying to turn its back on some aspects of Trudeau's legacy, but it's still the same government. Now, the annual increase in health transfers must be able to cover the expenses that have to be covered by Quebec. And there again, we see a refusal by this government. So year after year, the Quebec government will continue to be unable to make the payment associated with increased costs for the healthcare system in Quebec, and that applies elsewhere as well. In terms of infrastructure, $75 billion, only $9 billion is actually new money. $9 billion over 5 years. What exactly do you expect to do with that when the needs are so huge?
Okay, that's Yves-François Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc Québécois. The reason we're dipping into all of these reactions, of course, is because this is a minority government, and the government's going to need at least 3 votes or 3 people who get the flu when that vote comes in a couple weeks' time. Certainly sounds like from the beginning of what Yves-François Blanchet is saying there is that the government didn't meet the 6 non-negotiable demands that the Bloc had put forward. We will wait to see whether he gives a definitive answer or whether he says he will look at it. I can tell you as well that the NDP has just put out a release, and we'll bring you some of their interim leader when he emerges, saying that this is a critical budget. It comes at a critical time, that the New Democrats understand that they were sent to Ottawa to work for workers and families. They will begin the work of judging whether it meets the needs of Canadians. There are measures that are welcome, says the NDP, that have been advocated for, but there are measures, he says, that are a step in the wrong direction. So the New Democrats are going to take some time and look at it and see whether or not they can support it. So at this stage, we don't know how this is going to go, but it does sound as though some people have some things to look at and consider. Let's bring in CBC's Peter Armstrong, senior business correspondent. Sorry to keep you waiting. There's lots going on.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Give me your take on what this does to the business environment and sort of the fiscal picture of the country right now.
I think there's a couple of things. The environment that it comes from is still very perilous, and there's not a ton in this that addresses what happens if things get worse and not better. This offers a plan to how to get out of the mess we're in into a better place. That plan comes with a high degree of difficulty, and pulling it off is going to take both time and execution, neither of which we have in abundance. We don't have a ton of time, and we don't have a long history of governments, recently anyways, implementing some of these big, bold, ambitious plans that they've had. And so, you look at some of their tax programs where they're trying to incent businesses to spend more, build more, produce more. The manufacturing side of it, I think, is one of the most interesting ones where they've really ratcheted down the potential tax burden on manufacturers in this country, so long as they build more, do more, create more for Canadians, by Canadians, employ Canadians. But as I say, the degree of difficulty in that is enormous, and the margin for error is incredibly small. Things could very easily get worse and not better. And there's not a ton in this budget that lays out precisely what they'll do for Canadian businesses, Canadian workers, if indeed things do get worse, not better. You have economists like Armin Yalnizyan that have been banging the drum for years now, but really in the last couple of months leading up to this, saying we need to have a better plan for helping workers now. We're going to get GDP numbers this month that will tell us that whether or not Canada actually slipped into a recession this summer or not, this plan is going to help the Canadian economy in 5 years, 3 to 4 years. The problem is what happens right now, and can those two, can one crossfade as the other sort of comes up? That's going to be difficult to pull off.
As David was saying, though, is the idea to create an environment that is even more attractive than the United States and more competitive in terms of a place to stay here so that we don't lose business?
Yeah, so you go through like not to get too deep in the weeds, but it's budget day, so let's get into the weeds. The marginal effective tax rate is what we're looking at here. And they've tried to sort of bring it down through different measures for every sector. There's a chart that just shows every sector across the economy. And then if you zero in on manufacturing, it goes from, I can't remember the exact number, David,
8.2
to 0.4%. Effectively saying, if you build anything. If you buy a land and then put a building on it and then fill it full of equipment, you can write that off at 100%, and you can write it off at 100% right now. The equivalent in the United States, I think, is 12%.
12.1. And actually, I lied. It's 8.6. It goes down from 8.6, so it's even bigger.
So
right?
these are sweeping changes that I haven't had a chance to talk to many Canadian manufacturers about this particular yet. I think they will be really excited by that prospect. I think they will have concerns, again, about the implementation and about a lot of the money that's in this is Trudeau.
I'm excited by that
rolling
prospect.
That over
Like,
sounds easy, and you can write that down in a plan and put it in a
big picture, it's not a great idea.
Converting it can get tricky.
But who wouldn't get excited by that? I mean, maybe I'll set up a business. I've got lots of ideas.
We want to make Canada the most
Maybe you should.
country on earth, and we want to remove the uncertainty for businesses looking to invest. Canada's done what it can, and it may be more competitive than the U.S., except for the tariff wall. And except for whatever Donald Trump is willing to do to target your sector and the lack of a final deal on even the sectoral tariffs, let alone CUSMA. So that uncertainty isn't more powerful than the incentive of the tax.
And it doesn't,
let's be
it
clear.
doesn't
There is
sound
no
like that
such
gets
thing
us
as a
some
final deal
overwhelming
with Donald Trump.
growth projections
That's exactly
either,
the point.
right?
That's just silly.
Even with all of
Right?
this, even once you factor in all of this spending, you're looking
You know
at
what I'm
like
talking
pretty
about.
sluggish 1%,
There's no final
1.2%
deal with
growth.
Donald Trump.
Keeps us out of a recession.
Keeps us out of recession, hopefully. And if it works. But as I say, high degree of difficulty, low margin of error.
It buys time.
Which is really important.
That's the key thing. It's
100%.
buying time to get to the midterm elections, to build a foundation from which you can do an economic pivot, open up the trade corridors, get the major project offices going. But it's all got to work in succession. And I got to say, Don Farrell, Rosie, at the major projects office out in Calgary, no pressure, but there's pressure because these are the projects that can really move the needle on GDP because of what's happening in the key sectoral areas. That needs to deliver. That needs to work, or it's a key pillar of this plan.
And David, if I may, the importance of getting these early projects done isn't just about saying these are the kinds of projects we're doing. This is messaging to the rest of the world and to the rest of Canadian industry that we're back into business. And so they got to get those done quick.
Okay, I want to bring in a little bit of the political reaction. Pierre Poilievre will be reacting inside the House of Commons, not doing a scrum, but he has already tweeted saying, Mark Carney nearly doubled Trudeau's deficit and kept Liberal taxes on groceries, work, energy, home building. Conservatives will continue fighting for affordable lives for Canadians. They call this progress. We call it what it is, says Poilievre, a decline. How much more will they ask Canadians to sacrifice in this costly Liberal budget? Enough decline, enough sacrifice, bring an affordable budget, I think.
I love how Pierre Poilievre will
so that
always
doesn't
present
sound like a
himself
fellow,
as
who was going to
being
support the budget,
someone
though I'm
who
not
fights
expecting
for
that anyway. We'll see what he
the
says
working
inside
class,
the House of Commons.
for the little
David,
guy.
I want to bring you back just to talk about this
But
infrastructure
take
fund,
a
which
good
we've been
close
talking
look
about because it
at
came out in the Globe
any
this morning. We
bills
confirmed it, but we didn't really have
the
any
Conservative government has ever passed.
access to this money.
Any bills that Pierre Poilievre has supported and any bills that he has opposed.
The new one is a $51 billion.
You have to do that. Never, ever listen to what these guys say. Watch what they do. That is what tells you where they stand. And Pierre Poilievre is not, by any stretch of the imagination, on the side of the working class.
Infrastructure and local community projects. But a lot of this comes with a catch because it breaks down into a couple of streams. There's a provincial and territorial stream. It'll support housing enabling infrastructure, roads, water, wastewater, health-related infrastructure, houses, and infrastructure, colleges and university. And to access funds, provinces and territories must agree to cost match the federal funding, so it's not free money, premiers, and to substantially reduce development charges and not levy other taxes that hinder the housing supply. So it's a bit like the Housing Accelerator, but it exists as a baseline annual infrastructure fund. That to tap into this, you need to get the money, you have to agree not to raise any of the housing charges that get in the way.
Development charges, yeah.
You have to match it. So say you want $2 billion here in Ontario, Doug Ford's got to come up with $2 billion, and everywhere you go where that money is going to be used, they have to agree not to raise development charges to offset that burden and not to raise other taxes that would hinder the supply of housing. Because
That's
when
smart.
you're spending $25 billion to try to boost the housing supply, curbing immigration substantially to reduce the pressure on the housing supply, you can't have the lower orders of government who've been calling for money and federal action, then gumming it up with detrimental action or inaction and a lack of cash. Now, there is a bit of a carve-out for this. There's $5 billion over 3 years for health infrastructure. This is hospitals, emergency rooms, urgent care centers, medical schools. You don't have to tick any boxes on development charges to get that. You need to build out an emergency room.
But do you have to match with that promise as well, or you don't know?
It says, recognizing the critical need to strengthen health infrastructure, the requirement related to development charges and other taxes noted above will not apply to this fund.
Okay.
So yes, you have to match, but you don't have to commit to not raise development fees and these sorts of things. So there's a blend of it, but you can see this all adds up to about $280 billion in infrastructure and capital investment that they're putting in here. Like there's $80 billion for defense, $30 billion of it is capital. Some of that's going to be dual purpose in the north, roads, for example, to get to a military base could also be part of the passageway to a mining site or to a critical mineral facility. They're hoping all of this unlocks a bunch of domestic
Lost my camera.
$1 trillion is the number they set on it. The business experts we talked to in the briefing, Randall Bartlett, for example, with Desjardins, they're skeptical that it's going to unlock this much. I think it could have been even more ambitious here.
Okay, just to bring people up to date on where
That
we
is
are,
such a drag.
the finance minister is still delivering his speech inside
Such a
the House
drag.
of Commons there and getting more details. Pierre Poilievre will also respond inside the House of Commons, but we already have some response from him over Twitter. He says that Mark Carney has doubled Trudeau's deficit. Conservatives will continue fighting for affordable lives for Canadians. So I guess he will consider what's there, but it doesn't sound to me like the Conservatives are going to support this.
And just update on what's happening with the Bloc Québécois. Mr. Blanchette, according to his office, says he'll meet with the caucus tonight, but he doesn't see how they can vote in favor of the budget because their 6 demands were not met.
Okay.
So we have some skepticism here.
Liz May, the leader of the Green Party, says she will vote no unless the government's willing to negotiate on some of the environmental measures. And the NDP says it understands it's here to work for Canadians. It's going to look at the document and will consider what to do next. Okay, I want to bring in At Issue to discuss some of the politics behind the budget and what they're seeing so far. Chantal Hébert, and from the lockup at Old City Hall, Andrew Coyne and Althea Raj. Good to see you all. Thank you for being here. Althea, let me start with you. What do you make of what you've been reading today and whether it delivers on what the Prime Minister promised?
I think a lot of people who were looking for that generational style investment will be disappointed. I think what it does show, though, is that Mark Carney has clearly yet again turned the page away from Justin Trudeau. You know, we're just a stone throws away from where Justin Trudeau was 10 years ago, just after being sworn in as Prime Minister. He went to Foreign Affairs next door and was greeted to loud cheers from public servants who were so happy that Stephen Harper was gone and the cuts that he had brought into international development and the bureaucracy that was over. Statistics Canada fighting was over. And here we have a budget with actually deeper cuts to the public service than Stephen Harper, cuts to international development, even some nods to reducing the frequency and the quality of the data at Statistics Canada. So I don't know if that was purposeful or not, but the parallels obviously are drawn there. What's interesting to me politically is you can see this budget as nothing here that the opposition can support, and you can easily read this budget as nothing in here that the opposition can support.
Andrew, you're in the lockup too. What do you take away from it?
A little different. I mean, after all the hype about transformational this and generational that, what you got is a pretty conventional Liberal budget. There's oceans of new spending in here. They're actually going to spend more than the Trudeau government at its height. They're going to borrow more than the Trudeau government at its height. The deficit's going to be twice as large as in the last Trudeau budget. It's true that they're going to call a lot of it capital spending, which we used to just call spending. Okay, fine. Maybe some of that's useful and good. It's on the, they were going to spend less to invest more. It's on the spend less side that they really fall down. That comprehensive expenditure review that was so ballyhooed before the event, in the end came in at 3 years from now, they'll spend $13 billion less than they otherwise would on a budget of $500 billion. So 2.5% cuts in spending. That is not transformational. That is not a shift in spending. That's just a lot of new spending with some cuts to make room for it. The really disappointing thing is on the growth side. We're facing a growth crisis. We were even before Donald Trump came along. There's very little in here to spur growth. They've repackaged some pre-existing tax changes where they're going to allow accelerated expensing. A couple of new things added on, maybe some tweaks on competition measures, but it's really, really small beer stuff.
Chantal, you're watching from Montreal. It doesn't sound, at this stage anyway, as though the budget has the support from anyone, but the NDP is certainly considering things.
Yeah, well, first I want to go back to Andrew's point about the height. I don't think that I can think back to a budget that was so overhyped ahead of time as this budget. And the reality is, maybe it's from rookies in the PMO, failure at comms, but the way to do it usually is you under-promise and you over-deliver. This budget was over-promised and under-delivered in many ways. And you're kind of stuck with a gap between the rhetoric of the government about how transformational it is and the reality. And talking about the cuts in spending, I'm not saying you should take a hatchet to jobs, but if that small percentage is if you get to it. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. As for the politics of it, it is not the budget of a government that is looking to the NDP or the Bloc Québécois or the Green Party to support. There is nothing in there that will make it easier for the NDP to justify that it will support the budget.
You kind of get a sense there, caught between a rock and a hard place.
The NDP to struggle.
If you don't spend enough, then the Green Party, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois will not support the budget. But if you spend too much, the Conservative Party won't support it.
It was never going to happen, but it's not the Bloc's request, the NDP's take on civil servants and unions. All of that seems more designed to give them a reason to vote no than to vote yes.
I mean, it seems from what you're saying and from what David's been telling me as I catch up, it seems as though it's a budget that doesn't quite do everything the government laid out, but maybe isn't so bad that it can't survive a budget vote.
Well, here's a reason to support it. If you had an election,
to Chantal's point, I think it's really hard to see.
What's the only thing that can happen? We have a Liberal government right now.
Looks like a Harper government.
We have a Liberal government right now.
A lot larger numbers and much
What's
more,
the only thing that can happen?
Direct funding of
you get a Conservative government
for critical minerals. I like the heavy hand.
So with the Green Party and the NDP and the Bloc Québécois feel better about that?
Strategy. We are basically acknowledging in this
think
budget
more
that
than
there's not
one
gonna be a cap
step
on oil
ahead.
and gas,
That's
so
all I'm
money
asking.
is not going to be
More than one step ahead.
There's no like tangible little popular gimmick. Like it's not drafted like a budget that the Liberals want to go to an election on. It is drafted like a technocratic budget that is intended to be a budget that somebody who wants to govern for a while has presented. But who's going to support it? And maybe you have people like Chris D'Entremont and other MPs who will cross the floor and give the government the votes. But if not, some people are going to have to.
Who's going to support it? Anyone who doesn't want a Conservative government.
30 seconds to you, Andrew, and then Chantal.
Doesn't that make sense? And that would be a lot of people. It would certainly be more than 3 people, which is all the votes the Liberals need to pass this budget.
Not going to provoke an election. They will find a way to not vote on this. They may not vote for it, but they cannot afford an election at this point.
Chantal, 30 seconds to you.
Okay, so Mark Carney's problem is going to be, if Andrew is right, and he may well be, that he will be facing 3+1 opposition parties that are basically saying they don't support the budget, even if they don't walk the talk of not supporting the budget.
Exactly.
That does have
They won't walk the talk.
Forward. Right?
They'll try to bargain.
The government, if it wants to
They'll try to get
those
something
plans, will need allies.
based on the threat that they
And
won't
so
support
it.
it.
Will be fine, and I agree with Althea.
Which is fine.
I'm not
That's
sure
politics.
that it would be a very exciting platform to run on if you were a Liberal.
Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. We will see you all later on the National. Thank you for your first take, though. Appreciate it very much. Let's bring back David Cochrane for a final thought.
Well, it's interesting. The cuts may be too big for the New Democrats to support on a budget vote, especially if you're Heather McPherson and you're seeking the leadership. getting that caucus to do something in a united way on a budget like this is going to be difficult to pull off. The Conservatives, the deficit is probably too high for them to vote for it. So Chris D'Entremont and friends on line 1, 2, and 3. I spoke to Chris D'Entremont the other night, and he made it clear to me. He said, people in Atlantic Canada, certainly in Nova Scotia, where he is from, and it's D'Entremont, by the way, we're going to need to say that name a lot in the next couple of days. They don't want an election. He doesn't want an election. He was deciding whether or not he's going to vote for the budget. He said he would make a decision by Thursday. He is not in his chair in the House of Commons right now. Neither is Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. The Politico article has put the cat amongst the pigeons on Parliament Hill, I would suspect. So
here's what that political
David, we'll
article is talking about. Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont said he's thinking about crossing the floor and joining the Liberals.
Issue, and also
leaving the Conservative Party, joining the Liberals.
You're going to see a lot of him everywhere in the next couple of days. He is the man of the hour, as it were. But
that would get you 1/3 of the votes, the extra votes that the Liberals need.
Federal budget 2025 continues on Power and Politics with David Cochrane up next. I'm Rosemary Barton on behalf of myself and the whole team here. Hope that helped you understand. We'll keep digging into the details to bring you more coverage and analysis in the hours and days ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Power and Politics up next.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, this is politics, right? This is the nature of politics. Everybody's going to complain about this budget because they're dealing with a minority government, and they know that the government desperately needs 3 more votes, and so everybody's going to be trying to make Mark Carney believe, like, well, I'm the guy. I can get you this 1 extra vote as long as you're willing to do this for me. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's malicious or diabolical. I mean, that's politics. So, do I believe that we'll be looking at a new election? No, I do not. Because at the end of the day, like I said, and you heard the commentator support this view. At the end of the day, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party would rather the Liberals be in power than the Conservatives. No doubt about that. There's just no doubt about that. So they're kind of in a game of chicken where they know they don't want an election. They don't want to bring down this government. But at the same time, they don't want to be seen as weak and selling out their constituents, their base, their supporters. So I would imagine they're all kind of hoping somebody else is going to support the budget. And of course, as I said, they will all try to negotiate and get a little something more from the Liberal government, because they're in a tremendous bargaining position right now. They have a lot of hand, ladies and gentlemen, in these negotiations, because certainly the Liberals don't want to face another election. They have nothing to gain from that. So those are my thoughts. Thank you so much